How's everybody doing tonight? Sorry for being a little late, but we're here now. This is the latest edition of Converse, the show where we have a great conversation with an interesting guest. And this is not only a guest, but a friend of mine as well, Donald Oliver Davis, the author of Revolution, an introduction to the art and science of worldview warfare. Welcome, Don. Don. I'm gonna call you Don. All right, that's cool.
That's fine. That's fine.
So,
Well,
first, let's speak to some people, and then we'll get into since they have been waiting. How you doing, Booker? J.S. David Boswell, Zudica. How you doing? Always with the awesome art. John, Dr. U, Cook DW, Derek 405, Dan Glenn. All right, so we got a nice little group in here. All right, welcome, Don. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Mo. I hope you and everybody out there is having a happy Friday.
Yes. Oh, we got Tiger Auntie in the house. How you doing as well? So, Chaz. So, just for the new people coming here, so how we kind of do this show is we have a closed conversation between me and the guests for about 15, 20 minutes. Then we refer back to the live chat for maybe a good spell, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then we come back and do another segment, a conversation. And then we go back to the live chat and we just move back and forth to that. So I've been waiting to do this for a while. Me and Don have had several conversations all the time. We're always talking on the phone about different subjects, but now we finally get it on the record. So, Don, you want to introduce yourself to the folks and give them a little understanding of what worldview warfare actually is?
All right. So, my 9 to 5 right now, and for several years, almost a decade now, it's been in software engineering. And so, I've written this book that everyone can see. Took many years to write this book, and basically my background that led me to have the experiences that went into my worldview warfare theory. Basically traveling to Asia, Australia, Europe, the Caribbean, and all over the good old US of A.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's studies and work, and all over the world. It just led me up to the point to culminate in the book.
Okay. So, I have to ask this question. I don't think I ever asked you this question before. What makes a person wake up one morning and say, I'm going to write a book? I mean, because when we do things like podcasts or shows or things of that nature, I mean, you see the fruits of your labor immediately. With a book, that's especially a book that's well referenced like yours that has so many facts, and they're all referenced from reputable sources. How does that process work?
Well, I think on one hand, it's like that creative aptitude that, it just manifests in different ways when we're young. For some, it's drawing and the traditional art, and then for others, it's speaking, just building that charisma, cracking jokes with your friends, and for others, it's music. And so, really, I found that out of the different, I guess, arts that I kind of had an aptitude for writing. And one of the earliest, I guess, indications that led me to really just it crystallized for me was back in grade school. I wrote in our English class, we had an assignment to write a short story. And when I started writing my short story, it just really got longer and longer. And I really found myself enjoying writing. And at the when we turned our assignments in, I remember the teacher, she spoke about different students' work and things she found interesting, but she didn't mention mine at all. She didn't say anything good or bad. And that made me think that must have been good, because that's just the way I took it. I took it as it was something about what I wrote that she just didn't want to. She was just basically hating on me. And so I was like, might be something there. So, did an undergraduate English again. This teacher was different. This teacher really liked my work and would read it in class, and that gave me that encouragement that I needed, and it just stuck with me. Even though I studied technical things, I was really glad that I chose like a liberal arts undergraduate so that I could really still explore that creative artistic side.
So let me. You brought up. You said the word technical. So would you say you took a technical approach to your data collection for this book, or the way you sorted it and presented it?
Oh yeah, definitely. The way it really started was as part of a final project that I was working on in grad school, and so I took those that understanding of technical writing, and really the type of writing that's for like journals
Mm.
and things like that. Before the book, I actually published the book. I had what kind of was the seed bed of the book. Published an article in the Journal of Information Warfare back in 2010, and that became my book. Basically, is really going in deep and expanded on that article.
Oh, so it just one piece of writing kind of just snowballed into what we have here now. This finished product.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess some people are curious, and it took me a while before um, it crystallized for me what worldview warfare was, because it's such a it's something that you had to get your head around. So could you explain to the people, like maybe it's like a boil down? Of course, this whole episode isn't an introduction, and the book is an introduction into worldview warfare. But what exactly is that?
Okay, so starting with the first part, worldview. Worldview is, you could think of it as, we have an inner life and an outer life.
Mm-hmm.
Our outer life is the words we speak, the our deeds, things that people can observe. And a good example of that is the online persona mode that you've created.
Mm-hmm.
Just with your voice, you have people have come to get to know you. People don't know how you look, but because of your words, people can in their mind shape a picture of who you are as a person.
Right.
And so the things that we can't see by looking at somebody, that's the inner life. Those are our thoughts. And uh, as well as what I refer to as the spiritual heart. And so worldview warfare basically deals with um, using the inner and outer life as a means of uh, offensive or defensive warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So an example of that would be the ideas that we have of being an American, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of uh, thoughts and how we move, uh, it 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 presents a sort of, it can be looked at as a weapon of sorts. So, like if we were to go to another country, we would bring that America with us. And so we would look at things happening in another country and say, you know what? I like that or I don't like that because and you start critiquing these other places because you have that with you. And so as basically we are all uh our worldviews are weaponized in that sense. And some groups might say, hey, what we have here, it doesn't measure up to this American way. We should change it. Or, hey, we don't want these people, Americans, coming over here changing the way we live, even though they might have material things. We might, the other group might say they lack in other areas. And so there'll be just on a, and this is just on the level of just taking a trip somewhere. People, if you've experience just traveling, then you could see that low level type of worldview warfare take place. Some people call it culture shock.
Hmm.
If you've ever experienced culture shock, even going to other regions of the United States, because
Well,
mhm,
allow me to interject right there. And I promise I got a comment in the live chat that I wouldn't interject as much, but as in the conversation, I want to make sure I understand. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
sure.
Um, so how does the word paradigm play into worldview? Is that kind of like, what is it similar, or is that synonymous? A person's paradigm and how they uh, view the world, like, the earth being round. I mean, that's how you see the world, as it being and it is that a good example of or is it good a synonym to a worldview?
Yes. And so basically, so if people, you use the about the world being round versus it being flat, for
Hmm.
example. So if the inner life dealing with the way we think, and for focusing on the thought, so that will bleed over into our outer life. We will move in the world a certain way depending on how we view inside our minds, how we think about the world, then
Hmm.
affects our actions.
Okay, I got you. Okay. As in Don Glenn also said, your perspective. So that's another good word. So okay, we define. I think we accurately define worldview. So I'm assuming there's some kind of attack on shaping how people see the world. And I guess your book is the studies the arts and the sciences on how they, and we we use that word they, um, attack our minds. So you want to dive a little bit into that?
Okay, yeah. So basically, where I define they in the book is basically ruling parties. So the
Mm,
rulers of a country, a kingdom, even, and that's on the large level, but even going down to the small level of the family unit, there's a person, there's a leader.
mm,
So going back up to the collective level, the large scale level, that they, the people that have in our a society like ours, for example, the people that will have the economic power to influence politics and religion. That would be the they.
okay.
Yep. And so on one hand, it's like government. Just take government for example.
Mm,
Government, in order for a government to function, the people have to be on board with it. And so the rulers have to engage in worldview warfare on the level of just keeping the people together, keeping unity. And if outsiders, people that say you're dealing with a good government,
mm,
say if an outsider come in and wanted to subvert that government, then you, as a ruler, you would need to have a defense built around your conception of government and your regime, so that the people will move in a certain way. So it doesn't necessarily, and I go into in the book, it's not necessarily a bad thing worldview warfare is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be used in like any kind of weapon for good or evil.
Yeah. So you're saying it's just a vehicle. It's just another, like you said, like a gun. It could use to be rob a person or to protect life. In the same sense.
Yes, and so how I differentiate between the two is I say that when we're dealing with the more nefarious, insidious form of worldview warfare, I refer to that as revolutionary. And then counter revolutionary would be the just ruler, the that dispenses justice to everybody.
So I guess when I first heard you talk about this book, it took me a while to get my head around it because we all, like any human being, we want to think in binary terms of, like you said, good, bad, right, wrong, that kind of thing. But I guess what I've come to understand, and correct me if I'm understanding this correctly or not, if they suck you into the conversation, then you're already impacted by the worldview warfare. Is that a correct assessment?
Okay, so give me a little bit more context. Like,
So say for instance, flat Earth, round Earth. Let's just, because that's the most binary conversation that you could have. The fact when they suck you into that conversation of debating that topic, then you've been sucked into or being impacted by the worldview warfare and just the act of having that conversation or debate.
okay, so for that particular example, I would say yes, in the sense of if a person spends their time trying to convince someone of the earth being a certain way, say a person wants to engage the flat earthers and just hit them with different pieces of evidence for their side, and the problem is when it becomes an obsession. So
Mm-hmm.
so if the flat earthers are obsessed, or the round earthers are obsessed with this argument, then I would say that would be an insidious form of worldview warfare that's working on both groups.
Right. That's it's no. I mean, cause the way I see it is, there's no reason to even debate that subject, right? Because what does it change? I mean, it doesn't change our everyday life, really. I mean, I'm sure some people push back against that, but we're not leaving here. So to get sucked into the point where, like you said, being obsessed with it, being consumed with it, then they've been successful in sucking you in and actually engaging you as a weapon in the worldview warfare. If I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, so in the case of say there's a flat earther that learns about this, well, okay, that just learning about it, that's affecting that inner life, and then because of that, they're going to, for example, with going down the path of obsession, then it starts to change how they move in the world, how they look at everything else. So it's like, well, if there's all this hidden evidence about flat earth, and what else is being hidden, and at
Mm-hmm.
that point that person can be hit with something else. So the flat earth theory itself can be used as a bait to draw the person in to a conspiratorial way of thinking, and then once they're there, they could get hit with something else, and it's just like a gradual, kind of like pulling somebody that can't swim into the deep end
Mm-hmm.
without them knowing really the danger that they put themselves in.
It's basically a mental destabilization tool that, and like I said, I'm still getting my head around it because, as you know, I always speak on binary thinking and, just being given two options, ones and zeros, and this is how I believe they program society. So when I came across your book and your concept of thinking, it fits very well because that's how they want to suck people in and make them push them on one side or the other instead of having a nuanced conversation and getting to an understanding with another person. It's like you go to red team, blue team. uh, um, so yeah, so like I said, it's all right. So me and you have we're gonna take this conversation to another level. It's to me, it seems like a form of witchcraft. And the reason why I use that word witchcraft for people that's not for me, how I use that term as in control. It's a control mechanism because that's all. For my definition of witchcraft, witchcraft is just something that controls you. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say with the dealing with like revolutionary worldview warfare, then yes, if we, in the book I go into the history of some of the earliest forms of this, and you see it really from the beginning of like empire and really large scale civilizations, like going back to going back to the like Babylonians and Egyptians, and you see this. You see different things that the rulers did. You see different religious cults. You see uh, certain applications of science, philosophy, art, uh, economics, all these different things being used for control. And so oftentimes in history, there are good rulers that, like I said, they rule justly, but we have way too many examples in all societies all over the world throughout recorded history of rulers hurting their people
Mm-hmm.
and using that level of authority that they have and abusing that.
So once they go past the point of, I mean, that's when we hear the word propaganda. It becomes a negative term is when they use it unknowingly, and as Dan said, very good point. And we're going to come to the live chat here shortly. People are hypnotized by the gaslight. So once you become under a form of hypnosis, that's when propaganda becomes a negative term. And I'm sure your book gets deep into the use of propaganda. If you want to touch on that briefly before we go to the live chat.
Yeah, so from looking at propaganda, I really don't see, because the way that I structured my model, basically what I come to the realization is that within propaganda, you're gonna have that deception, and I refer to it as wicked deception. That's a part of propaganda, is the hook that empowers it. So I really don't see any ultimately positive, ultimately good. I should use the word good. Ultimately good uh form of propaganda. And so when you mention the word witchcraft, you're really hitting on something there, because we have to refer to something, a source of truth, an authoritative source of truth beyond um, us, ourselves. And so that is when you start to get into the spiritual aspect of this. And like I said, throughout history, you always find this spiritual aspect to worldview warfare kind of lurking uh, or latent in the background at all times.
Mm. So okay, so let's go to the live chat. Live chat, y'all have any questions for Mr. Donald Oliver Davis, the author of Revolution, an introduction to the art and science of worldview warfare. Of course, this initial part of the conversation has been very philosophical, but the next section of it, we're gonna get down into how it hits us on our everyday life. I want you to maybe point out some things that you've seen in the media or techniques that's being used that impact us, because we can speak on the terms of, the philosophy and that kind of thing, but we want to give people something practical where they can start taking control back over their lives. So we can continue to talk as the questions come in, and we'll address the questions as they're asked. But what is one of the, if you had to pick, what is one of the most uh, powerful weapons used in the worldview warfare?
Okay, so the way I so bringing this down from a more abstract down into a more concrete,
Mm-hmm.
there's worldview warfare on different levels. So on the individual level, I refer to that as psychological warfare. So it's affecting the body and the mind. So like Dan mentioned social media. That's a really good example. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna use that as an example. But first I want to go through the other levels. There's three levels. The individual level, you got psychological warfare. On the collective level, you have social engineering. And then when you're bringing in the spiritual aspect, then that's spiritual warfare. So they're all worldview warfare. They're just three forms, like water can be in a liquid form, a gas form, or ice solid.
So just so I grasp that, and the people at home grasp that, you have the individual,
Yes.
then you have the collective,
Yes.
and then you have the spiritual. So I'm digesting this on the fly. So the
Okay.
individual is myself, just me, Mo,
Yes.
and my collective is everybody that's in my social circle. People that, whether it's through social media or either in person contact, that would be my collective. Correct.
Yes. That's going from your family at your home out, expanding another out to your friends, out to the people that you're cool with, that you never met before, out to your city, country, all the way to the world.
Mm-hmm. And so then the spiritual, I would say, is like this umbrella over us all, of what people call the ether or the atmosphere, as in, once you have everybody individually uh, participating in their collective, the spiritual will be the sum total of all those collectives. Is that correct?
You're very, very close. I like how you mentioned it's an umbrella. And
Okay.
basically, so the spiritual aspect, it it uh it interpenetrates the collective and the individual, but it also goes further into the realm of the domains of existence that we as human beings aren't we're not we're not in that realm in completion. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We can perceive that realm in different ways. And so let me go with the
Okay.
social
Okay.
media.
Let's go. Let's walk through an exercise. Because what I want to do is, I want people to walk away from this conversation with some tools, with some tips, with some, because I think a lot of times people are getting these circular. It's a word that you used a while ago. It wasn't philosophical. It was another word you used and it escaped me. But we get into these high level, highbrow conversations, and people don't walk away with anything to use in their everyday life. So, okay, so say the individual. I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is I grab my phone. Okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
That's the first thing I do. So we have the media or the propaganda affecting my personal. That's on the personal level. Okay.
Well, okay, let me say it like this, Mo.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at this from the psychological warfare standpoint, now we haven't gotten down to the level of those five things listed right now. We're still above that.
Okay.
So Mo gets up, he grabs his phone. Now, right there, we're dealing with psychological warfare. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because Because not only is the mind engaged in the sense of, hey, I need to know what's going on. I don't want to miss anything. What's happened since I've been sleeping? Then on the other hand, there's the physiological. There is a movie on Netflix that deals with how talks about how social media at these Silicon Valley boardrooms or meeting rooms, they at Facebook and Twitter bring in psychologists. They bring in people that understand how perhaps even people for that deal with electronic gaming, especially electronic gambling, because these people know how to use electronic devices to give the to affect the human nervous system in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only our minds, but it's even our bodies. How the nerves, when we look at something, when we hear a bell, how that affects our thinking and draws us in. They know how to hit certain addictive centers in the mind, like drugs would. They
A
mimic that.
Pavlo, a Pavlovian, a Pavlovian. I can't even say the word. A
Yep,
Pavlovian response. And
exactly.
the reason why I'm guilty of this, I'm gonna give you. I mean, I'm gonna tell you how I'm guilty of this because I don't think any of us can escape it. It's fantasy sports. Um, I didn't realize I was addicted to it because I used to always say, "Man, why do people on social?" Because I don't do social media, other than to promote the show or to communicate out, anything about what we're doing over here on the channel, but or the podcast. But I always was like, how can people be addicted to social media and getting likes and those kind of things? But those, as you said, those bells, those dings when your player scores, updates when players get hurt, or that kind of thing. You have that Pavlovian response as well. So
Yes.
it hits you on many. There's there's no really escaping it. Right? I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, as far as things are today with the technology as the main issue, but worldview warfare doesn't necessarily have to have technology in the sense that we know it today.
mm-hmm.
Ancient technologies were not necessarily as effective, but or just drilling down deep into the human being, but they also did different things. Like if you look at for example, in ancient times, they would, if they want to come into another region, they would build a structure and they would write on the structure. I know I was just looking at and a video the other day was talking about the Persians, and one of the ways that they expanded was when they would go into an area, they would put up basically a billboard made out of stone, and they would write, the king would write or have his people write, if you follow me, if you submit to my rulership, I'm not going to make anybody a slave. And that was that, well, I won't use that word. That was totally different, because in the ancient world, most of the times when people were conquered, they were enslaved. But Persia's king said, no, you won't be enslaved. Join me. Fight against fight against your this slavery by joining with us. And so
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily have to have technology as we put it. But going back to the social media. So moving onto the collective level, we've dealt with how Mo's mind and body is being affected. Now we go to the collective. So Mo's family. If Mo has children, young, like teenagers, for example, even uh, younger than that these days, but they're being affected. So we're all in Mo's household. People are moving in a certain way because of social media.
So I'm a node. I'm a cell. Right now that they've triggered me through whatever information I consumed from my phone that morning. say my stock has went down or Bitcoin is going up or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then that controls, or not say it has the power to control or the opportunity to control how I interact with the other members of my collective.
Exactly. I would say the word influence.
Okay, influence.
So it has that external influence that you, as the father, you didn't necessarily give these corporations or they permission into your home to just move like that. But we kind of indirectly do by taking those things and say, if that Bitcoin went down, we treat, like say Mo, he might be a little bit grumpy. So his wife might have wanted to talk to him about something important, but now Mo don't want to talk. And
Mm-hmm.
then and maybe his kids wanted to show him that project before they went to school. But Mo, he don't want to see it right now.
The laughter is annoying now. Not this is not a true example, but I can see that the normal um, laughter and banter and chatter at the normal breakfast table now is an irritant because I've been shaped or nudged by the propaganda or the information or the control mechanism. Correct?
Exactly. And exactly. Now and check this out now. Now we still in the family. So
Mm-hmm.
let's take the individual lens and now place it on your wife. Now say she come across in her YouTube feeds one of these militant feminists and they said something like, if your man shuts down, girl, he probably cheating on you. And see, when she saw it, when she heard it, she was like, oh, that's stupid. But then at the breakfast table, it comes back up in her mind. It comes to her remembrance. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if something's going on with Mo. He's not talking this morning. Now, let's take that individual lens and put it on the kids now. Say something come across their TikTok that said, you know, parents are they just don't understand us. There's no reason to talk to them. They're not cool. They just don't get it. So now when the baby was like, you know, I really would love for dad to see my project before I go to school, and he just kind of brushed me off like that. Like maybe it's something to that, man. Them grown-ups, man, they just don't get it. I'm not gonna talk to daddy as much anymore. I'm on, you
Right.
know. So we have all these things interacting, but they're interacting within a certain framework. And that framework is the social engineering.
Mm-hmm. And then they
So
go to school and they enter and they leave one collective and enter to another collective being their peer group. And then it's a shared notion that, yeah, my parents don't listen to me either. Or that my adults in my circle don't at least listen to me either. And then you have that all those collective nodes on social media interacting with each other. And I think that's when we get into the spiritual, right? Where you have the teenage mind, where how teenagers feel they're not heard or seen or respected, and that kind of thing. Would that be the jump from the collective into the spiritual?
yes, I would make it in the way that I would say, okay, so they're in the school now, they have their peer group, but they also dealing with the structure of the education system and how the education system in many cases wants to usurp the family control. They want the kids to listen to them more so than their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a reinforcement of those TikTok messages on a bigger level.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that gets into the spiritual because when you talk about attacking the family, bringing chaos to the family, that is a pattern that you see throughout the world as a means of really gaining this control in this negative sense, because you could use family to strengthen the society and have a good ruler and use it in that way. But we see how it's been used to under subvert that family unit so that you have a group of people coming up that listen to someone else, and that someone else doesn't necessarily care about them.
And this is where we have celebrities and quote unquote idols.
Yes.
They build this pseudo relationship with their fans, for lack of a better word, and then they could, once they have their respect and their adoration, then they can feed them more propaganda and more information and nudge them in the way that they want to go.
Yeah, I would say that when dealing with the celebrities, for example, you have this trend about pushing people to the more to devices, the just getting people to go in a way that is an extreme, that's a destructive extreme. And it's like you see it over and over again, and you're like, so what are those people tapping into that impels them to push a message that they won't even push to their own kids at home? I'm sure you could think about some celebrities right now come
Mm-hmm.
to your head. I know
Yes.
one comes to my mind that was asked recently about a certain song and said, "I don't play that song when my daughter walks into the room. I don't play that around her."
And we even not with celebrities, we've seen this with the late Steve Jobs. He said, I don't allow my kids to play with the iPad or those those tools of technology,
Yes,
because
that is
he understands the power of it and what's the mechanism, what it's built for. So wow, like this. Hopefully, this is helping everybody. Now we get to how do you fix that? Okay, now say for instance, I pick up my phone and I see Bitcoin's going down, and now I'm gonna come to the breakfast table. How do I neutralize that weapon?
okay. So for that, and just for everybody, we haven't even touched on those 5 levels that's up there yet. We haven't
Mm-hmm.
even got there yet. So
And I promise you, you're going to be a reoccurring guest if you're so willing to bless us with your presence, because this is the kind of stuff that we need to implement, or at least to understand how this outside forces are having an effect on us. So I may be getting into the weeds a little bit much. So let me know. But I want to make sure we don't gloss over anything, because I want this to be practical and functional for people in their everyday lives.
certainly, certainly. So the other side of that coin, well, the counter to that, because it's really not the other side of a coin, is actually something that's totally different,
Mm.
which is counter revolutionary worldview warfare. So on the individual level, that is psychological education. And so to give you an example of that, that would be, okay, you get up and you think, instead of grabbing that phone, or just say you do grab it and you see the information and you think, okay, what's more important to me? This Bitcoin, this Facebook post, this social media post, or my family? Okay.
Mm.
And then on the social level, the collective level, to fight against that social engineering, there's social governance. So that's just governance, doing the right thing, treating people how you want to be treated in a society. That just on in the family, most family at the table, when the kids want to show them, all right, I'm gonna take the time to do this for my kid. My wife want to talk. I don't really feel like it right now, but baby, just give me a little bit. I got some things I'm trying to sort through, and we'll have that conversation. Running the family in a just way, then going out to the school, the teachers actually teaching the kids about how things affect them, how that technology that they're dealing with is affecting them, and how to think critically. So, and then there's the spiritual warfare component, tapping into that source of truth that's beyond ourselves, that we something to be accountable to. And so that's how you fight against these things.
So a term just popped into my head, like a light bulb. This false reality. So do you think that we operate in a false reality most of the time? Um, because that's what it seems like to me, that this worldview warfare creates an actual false reality around us. Because when you go outside, the sun is shining. When you open the refrigerator door, you have food, you have shelter, you have clothing. But for some reason, a lot of people can't find happiness with the things that they have and they actually possess.
Definitely to some degree it is a false reality. I think that the Matrix is a good analogy for this. Now I won't take it to the extreme to say we're living in some kind of simulation to that extent that
Well,
we're actually sitting up in a pod somewhere, and like I'm not going there with it. I think that
well,
would actually be a weapon. Go ahead.
let me refine my point when I say false reality. The reality at the breakfast table, I have this beautiful stack of pancakes and eggs and bacon. I
Yeah,
have surrounded by kids, family, wife,
right.
and for some reason, I'm not happy.
Exactly. Oh yeah, I'm following. I'm tracking with you.
That's what
I
I'm
know.
saying. This is this false reality of unhappiness when the real reality is I'm blessed.
Exactly. And so that would mean, like, for example, thinking about or having actually experienced uh people that don't have, and then being able to more to better appreciate when we do, even when we might not be in relative to our society, we might be not so well off, then we can still think about people that have even less, and draw appreciation from that. Or for even the person that's sitting in prison that by themselves,
Mm.
and if they could hear this message or a message like this to 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 find that even just being alive, to fight another day by just being alive, by just not giving up.
Mm.
And so yeah, that false reality is that when we focus on the self gratification, self glorification, that's what revolution is. And that's what makes the false reality, because it's really not all about us. We're important, we have value in and of ourselves, but it's not all about us.
So I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you a very. Let me see how I could put this. Do we create the false reality, or is it that is this where the spiritual plays in it? And let me expound on what I'm saying. Okay, I look at it and say, well, I went to school and I have this degree and I have blah blah. I'm saying let's go down the list. I deserve to have these things, right? And you see what I'm saying? And then you don't have them, what you think you should have, and that's where the unhappiness comes from, or that's where the um. You follow where I'm going here?
Oh yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. You're actually moving now. You're moving up that those five steps. So
Okay.
we come to the deception. When you ask, is this something that we're this put on us? I would say we participate in it, and that goes to the core of what deception is and how it works. Because in order to be deceived, you have to take it in. You have to agree with it. You have to go along with it in order to be deceived.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where we can compare worldview warfare to conventional warfare, or more when we think about armies on a battlefield or in a city in Middle East somewhere moving around with the rifles. When that soldier shoots that bullet, we don't have a choice if about accept the enemy doesn't have a choice of accepting that bullet into their body or not.
Mhm.
In worldview warfare, we do have the choice.
But do we?
We
And
get
the reason why I asked that question because this comes from a conversation with I had with Verstein from Truth to Talks, and this is the last conversation that we had. Are we to the point where we can escape the media?
I would say that, and here we're getting the propaganda. That is an argument that Jacques Ellul, who I got my propaganda theory, learned about propaganda from. He speaks about that and how it seems like we can't escape from it. And I would say to a certain degree, he's right. It's not an issue of escaping from it. It's an issue of what do we how do we allow our behaviors and thinking to change, because we are ultimately in control of what we do and how we think. And so at all times, really, if you think about it, now there might be those exceptions when you start getting into the things like mind control and those type of theories and what that really means.
Mm-hmm.
I would say even that thing in us going to the spiritual aspect, that our essence, is really not, other people really can't control that. They could influence it heavily, but we are ultimately in control.
The reason why I asked that question is because you brought up the bullet. We can, the soldier can't dodge the bullet, right? I mean, or he can't, if the bullet's lined up for him, he can't really control the impact of the bullet on him. Whereas, excuse me, in this world that we live in, from infancy, we have been set in front of screens.
Yes.
So that addiction predates even our consciousness. You see what I'm saying? Like that
Yeah,
that
I do.
that need for that interaction between this screen is so pervasive that
Right.
can we escape? I know we can. I mean, in the abstract, yes, we can. But in the literal aspect, that Pavlovian, and let me explain what Pavlov's dog is for people. I don't want to assume anything. So you had this scientist that he would ring the bell and then he would feed the dogs. And then he would ring the bell and he did this over and over again. And then he realized that even when he rang the bell and didn't feed the dogs, they would salivate. So you have this trigger and then a response or a reward to the point where now the reward is expected. And I think we all none and this might be, I might blow my own mind here, but is it that we want bad news? Because when we cut on the television, we want something. We're looking for something either to be entertained or scared or that kind of thing. So we go to look for this uh, fix or impulse or jolt to our system, whether it's good or bad. You want to? I mean, I guess I kind of. I mean, I hope I was clear on that. And if it wasn't, you can ask me to clarify more. But if you build that response, like with kids watching television from a very very young age, and they the music and the dancing and the laughing and that kind of thing, you've been conditioned. Is it escapable, especially with the amount of screens that we have now?
Okay, yes, I follow you. I follow you. I would use the phrase, and this ties into the spiritual aspect of the counter revolutionary worldview warfare.
Mm-hmm.
I use the phrase we're in the world but not of it. So we have to move in this world system that is constantly bombarding us with messaging to pull us in a certain direction. But we have to choose to tap into a source that is powerful enough to push that away. I would say if you're just talking about human beings in within our own power, then I would say yes, the way that they have built this system is so totalizing that I don't think I think you would get to a point where people would be controlled on a very intimate level and they wouldn't be able to break free. But with counter revolutionary worldview warfare, there is a spiritual source that can be tapped into to pull us that we could use to pull ourselves out of this false reality of this matrix.
Well, let me let me play the contrarian to that for 1 second. Even then, some people might use. I mean, if you say a Christian, for example, they might use their gospel playlist as that source of stimulation. It's like we can't. I think we got to the point where we can't go without being stimulated. And I hate to be I'm not being a pessimist here, but we had to have a real conversation because you can't correct the problem until you know what I'm saying, accurately identify it, right? So
Yeah.
even then, it's like, I'm gonna trade, I'm gonna trade my rated R movies for Tyler Perry movies because they're good and Christian and wholesome. You know what I'm saying? It's like they can't have that void there. The void just can't exist. We had to find, I got to give up my gangster rap for my Christian rap, or gospel music. It's always filling this void or this need that has been created in us, right? It's kind of like when people say, okay, I liken it to this. I'm going vegan and I want vegan barbecue ribs. It's like, what? Like, why does it have to be barbecue ribs? You know what I'm saying? Like, does that? Hopefully, I'm making.
Okay. I would say so. In the examples that you gave, there was a certain thing, a theme running through those things.
Mm,
So with the exchanging like the movies for the Tyler Perrys because there's this veneer of Christianity.
mm,
Uh, I would say by tapping into that spiritual source that's outside, that's greater than ourselves, that's greater than this world system, then there comes that discernment to see that yes, this has a veneer of Christianity, but no, this is a trick bag. We could look at the other example that you gave. I mean, it's slipping my mind right now. Um, well, you gave an example about the rap, taking the gangster rap,
yeah,
and
and
going,
filling it with gospel music, or just
yeah,
just say,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
just take it off of Christian for a second. Just I'm gonna go from a negative source or stimulus to a positive stimulus. But my question is the appetite for the stimulus. Why can't we just be quiet? Why can't we just be still? You understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
why it's kind of like it's this is like a paradoxical form of the worldview warfare of why do you have to pick one side or the other? Why can't you just say I'm gonna abstain from music in the morning and get quiet and get inside my own thoughts?
Well, yeah, I would say that the world system. That's the thing about the world system. In the world system, there is that binary. There is that positive and negative. There is that light side, dark side, right hand path, left hand path.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm talking about when fighting against this counter revolutionary, you're tapping into something that's outside of that. So it's outside of the binary. So that thing you say, what's in us, that is when we tap into that spiritual source that's outside of this world system, that awakens or brings something to us that we otherwise would not have had. And so that is the key. It's not, it might be positive in the sense of this world system. We exchange one obsession for another obsession.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But outside of that, when we tap into something outside of that, then we learn about being uh moderate. We learn about self-control. And so those type of things fight against those inner urges. And it is a battle within ourselves. And it's not gonna sit up here and make it sound like it's easy. It's not. But we do have tools at our disposal if we choose to, once we come into the knowledge of those tools, once we choose to use them as they were intended to be used, then yes, we can fight against this and we can be liberated. Like it really is like being liberated, like freeing a literal slave,
mm-hmm,
because this is psycho spiritual warfare, in the sense of, or psycho spiritual slavery is what I meant to say.
mm-hmm.
So it looks within ourselves, and when we look outside in the world, it does look pretty hopeless. I'm not, and you're right, it does.
And I don't want to use. I don't say I want to be a doomer and hopeless. I want to get to the root of the problem is the appetite. And first of all, I want to say shouts out to Black Light Revelations. Peace to you, brother. It's the appetite. It's like somebody will say, "Well, I don't drink that soda anymore. I drink Diet Coke." And it's like why can't you just have water? Why can't you just have something that's beneficial to you? Right?
Yeah.
It's we always have to fill the void or that appetite with a substitute for what we think is bad. But we can't just get something that's completely beneficial. Because that's what, and like I said, but that goes to the shaping of the appetite, which I know for myself, was set in front of a television at a very early age. And what makes me think, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but there was a show called Dream On that used to be on HBO. And the guy would think in TV clips. And we see it now. We think in memes. And, we think in movie lines and that kind of thing. That is so embedded. That appetite is so embedded into our psyche, that it leaves that gateway open to be influenced by the worldview warfare or the propagandas or the tools and techniques of it.
Yeah, I mean, with the example you used about the diet, that was a great example, because that's when you could really see this light dark side in the world system. So you got the one person that they're congratulating themselves for moving from the Dr. Pepper to the diet Dr. Pepper. And then you have the person that, they love their cheeseburgers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the person that they only drink water and they only eat vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And that person then looks at the other one and says they're stupid, essentially saying I'm better than them. So,
Yes.
and that way, the world systems got them again. It just got them on the light side, because
Mm-hmm.
on the surface it looks all good. Hey, I'm being healthy. I'm actually, this like literally is contributing to my physical health, but my spiritual heart is being affected, because it's being infected with pride. So now I'm treating that person to eat cheeseburgers and drink Dr. Pepper like they're stupid. I'm treating them in a way that I would not want to be treated.
Supremacy.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Having that one up on somebody else. And so that's what I'm saying, is that's what the world system gives us. It gives us that we could be junk food addicts, or we could be holier than thou people that live healthy.
Now I'm just soaking this all in because you don't realize how beneficial the conversation is for me, and hopefully everybody out there. Don, let's take a pause right quick and go back to the live chat right quick and let people just absorb. Maybe I hope everybody's having a introspective moment of the supremacy of I have all the facts. I have the purest sources of information, that kind of thing. Where I think your book, and that's why I'm so fascinated by it, is it helps us unpack and unwind these external forces of control on us that shapes us into the need to be supreme to other people, a need to be over or better or influential to other people. So let's stop right here. Let's get to some questions. Any questions out in the lab, y'all? I see the Fats family is talking to each other. It's very lively conversation. But any questions that we have for Don? I think the lack of questions mean that we're answering or providing some valuable information to the people. And with that said, Don, other than buying your book, because I think this is a re-release of your book, if I'm not mistaken, correct? I mean, that's why we waited to have this conversation. Let's get to a little bit of the business side of it, because I think you should be rewarded for your hard work, as anybody should be rewarded for their hard work. How can people get the book? This is your YouTube channel. I have it here, and I'll post the link in the I'll post a link in the comments after this video, so you can find Don's YouTube channel, which you have supplemental videos to the book. So how can they find your book?
Yes, thank you, Mo. They could go to Amazon and just type in. If you could pull up that image of the title, the cover page.
Yep, let's do that.
And just search for Worldview Warfare. And it should pop up, but the full title is shown there on the screen, and you can just type that in. Pretty much, if you type in Revolution and Worldview Warfare, you should get the exact hit. And so yeah, you could purchase it there. Mm-hmm. And yes, it is the revision after thinking about it and having conversations with people, questions that they had. I wanted to clarify some things and just really, I think, give it the best look possible. And so I think this is going to be my final time dealing with it because, yeah, man, it could go on and on and on. I have to choose to find a place to put a stop to it.
Because it's ever evolved. I mean, you're trying to hit a moving target, right? I mean, in all fairness, the techniques is constantly changing with technology, which technology is a huge component of the worldview warfare. So as technology updates, I mean, you always have to do revisions of the book. Or, I mean, that's another reason why your YouTube channel is so valuable. And I would recommend everybody, please stop right now and go subscribe to his YouTube channel, because I thought we were going to be able to get to some videos, but the conversation is so lively and fruitful that I didn't want to put a pause to it by going through the videos. But he has, I think, 4 or 5 videos that are supplemental. Natasha, I got you right there. I just posted the link in the chat. That's the link to Don's it's just Worldview Warfare YouTube channel. And like I said, there's some intro videos and very supplemental content to go along with the book. With that said, as well, this is a value for value platform. I don't take any money from YouTube. So if you found value in this conversation or any of the conversation that we have or any of the content that I create on this platform, please show value back. And as well, Don doesn't operate off the value for value model, but you're gonna find value. I mean, just this 1 hour and 9 minute conversation we had so far is just the surface of what you'll find in this book. So please go and show him value as well by buying the book, and hopefully it inspires you to write the next one.
Oh yeah, I would say, well, I do definitely ascribe to value for value. That makes a lot of sense. It's just that my channel isn't to the point that things get uh that value could be realized in that way. So I'm
I know, and,
still
and plus, to be honest with you, you have a finite. I mean, you have a hard copy, which pages and ink and those kind of things have a set price to print out the book. So I completely understand. You know what I'm saying? The why you have to, you know what I'm saying, do business in the way you do. But like I said, they're gonna find way more value than what you're asking for to the purchase price of this book.
oh yeah,
because
definitely.
because if it just think, if you can sit down to that breakfast table and realize when you pick up that phone the impact it could have on you and the loved ones around that breakfast table, and it could change your mind and how you deal with them, you cannot put a price tag on that value.
Definitely, and it's like the book has nearly 500 references. So when I say
Say that one more, cause I think people just gloss over that. 500 references to the book.
yes, so that means scientific articles. Maybe there's two references that will take you to a website. Other than that, it's books and scientific journal articles backing up what I'm saying, because some of the things, especially when you talk about the spiritual aspect, you know, I quote or I cite what certain people believe, and it might sound insane.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that stuff, I think it is insane. The problem is some of these people have a lot of power in this world, and I simply say what it is they believe, and I tell you who they are, and you can check it out yourself and go further into it and to learn more.
And the crazy thing is the more insane things seem to be, the truer they are. Um, I think
Exactly.
I think sometimes, I mean, just to get on a side conversation right quick. The most unbelievable things are some of the most true things.
Yeah, real life is more incredible than any kind of movie you can watch, any kind of thing like that. Real life is it's off the chains. It's all kind of stuff happening in this world, and it's been happening for thousands of years.
Let's see, Tom Burles, but Bullis. I always butcher his name. I butcher everybody's name. I'm sorry about that. It says, first you flat believe the news. Second, you question the news. Third, you distrust the news. Four, you see the tricks of the news. Five, you watch the news for topics to research on your own and realize that the news it get cut off. So yeah, so those are kind of the steps the steps that you go through with the news. And oftentimes people say, well, why do you even watch it? Why do you even watch it? But I think this goes back to the spiritual aspect of it. Uh, if you don't know what's going on in the world, it makes you awkward. Or would you say that? I don't want to say that that's true. I'm gonna ask you the question because you're the expert on this on the topic. Would you say that if you're not tapped into the I want to say spiritual, but the zeitgeist, just say the zeitgeist, doesn't that make you socially awkward in a way?
Well, when it comes to the news, in particular, like that we see on the TV, the evening news, I from time to time I do watch the news.
Mm.
Why do I watch the news? For that same reason you mentioned about understanding what's going on. Now, when I see the news, certain segments of the news, I'm able, especially when it starts getting political, when they talk about certain movements in other countries and things, And I'm always when I see that, when I hear that, it's with a grain of salt. I'm like, okay, this is American media. They're gonna put an American bent on it to defend American interest. And I don't see anything necessarily nefarious about that, because any country you go to, if a country government doesn't have control over the media, that country is gonna fall in a little bit, because enemies will be able to put messages out that want to destroy that country. So,
well, you bring up a fascinating point there with, you said the American media, and they put out what's pro-America, but we see from administration to administration, and we're not going to get political here, but just the what is defined as American, how it changes on a dime, depending on who's in charge or who appears to be in charge. Doesn't that speak to the how fluid the spiritual and what's the other one, the collective, can change or move?
well, okay, that's okay. Where's my phone?
No worries, brother.
I couldn't find my phone. It was right in front of me. Anyway,
That's the boule.
yes.
They want you to answer that question.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good one. So basically, I'm turning this thing off. All right. So basically, bro, you brought up an interesting point, because what you see what you just highlighted are the different levels. So on one hand, you do have that left-right, conservative, liberal battle that goes on. Okay, that red and that blue. But then you think about, there might be a certain organization that both sides they meet up at, and they put that stuff to the side, and they talk about greater things in the sense of pushing a unified agenda forward, that they fight over particulars, or they have, like WWE one, and it's Trump was involved with WWE. I thought he was I see Trump and Obama as information warriors, worldview warriors. They were very good at using perceptions. And so basically you have that WWE thing going on. But at the end of the day, both of those wrestlers, after that Royal Rumble is over with, they're going to the same locker rooms, and then after they come back to the office a few days later, they're picking up their checks from the same place. So yes, there are things that change from one administration to the next, but there are higher ideals and goals that touch upon what America is. An example of that would be the American dream. Now, you might have different view of the American dream than I do, but the whole fact point that there is a such thing as American dream is powerful, because guess what? You don't hear about Australian dream, a Chinese dream, a British dream. It's an American thing. What is it about this country that pushes people to dream, or people to fight against the dream? Because if it was nothing, if it was like Santa Claus, who cares? Nobody's on the corner trying to get people to not or to believe in Santa Claus. But that American dream, that's gonna trigger people no matter where you stand.
Well, could it be? And I don't know if it's the right answer or not. Could that prove that America is more of a idea of the collective, more than, I mean, because the way this nation, corporation, however you want to put it, depending on who you're talking to, was formed. It's not formed like any other nation that grew up out of traditions or those kind of things, right? It's out of ideals and ideas of what we think the country should be, right? I mean, like when you go to China, they have a hardcore national identity. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of years old. When you look at this country, it's only 200 years old. or more, to the point where it's still fluid, and that collective that you speak of can still be shifted and nudged and formed and reshaped. What do you think about that?
Okay, so what I would say is, and this is it's awesome that there's people from other countries in this, and it's not that I'm saying that other nations don't have narratives. All these nations have narratives. All of them have this ideal. We
Mm-hmm.
see that and manifested partly in the flag of each nation. There's an ideal of we are this, we are that. And in America, it can come to it can some, and this is part of the genius, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way of America, because while we might individually disagree on what being an American is, when we go to another country, all people have to do is just observe us for a little while, and they might that's an American. That's an American.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Right. So a person can be pro America, uh, an American person. They could be a patriot, for example, a person that would just support the system, even when it's wrong. A nationalist, I would say, versus a patriot, uh, that would say, okay, I support my country, but yeah, they're wrong about these things. So
Well,
wherever,
that's supremacy, right? It's an era of supremacy. I mean, we think. I mean, let's be honest. We think America is the center of the world.
right, and
Americans do. I mean, we were taught that in school. We were taught that in movies. I mean, now we'll go back to the propaganda. We were taught that just for my generation. We had Rocky IV. We had Top Gun. You know what I'm saying? These things shaped that we were a superpower and the center of the world.
yeah, you're right. And the thing is, the thing that makes America special is that, okay, where we're just like everybody else, I'll start there, is that every nation has that the government will push a centrality of that particular land because that is where that's home. Okay, so of course, if you want, you're ruling some people, you want them to think that their home is a nice place to be, because otherwise it's kind of like, why do we even deal with this government? Something's got to change. So you want people to like being at home, to love their home. But the thing that makes America different is that we export that to other places, and no other countries don't have that same influence. Now, certain regions like India has their Bollywood, Nigeria has their Nollywood,
Mm.
in China they have big time movies because their population is so big. Some of those movies that get popular in China become some of the most popular by numbers in history. But in America, we're not watching Chinese movies like they watch American movies. Nobody is watching, American music. Those sorts of artistic influences have moved everybody.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, let's just go, let's go a little deeper. Why is that? Could it be that Hollywood is the equivalent of the Pentagon, but on the offensive side, where we call the Pentagon the defensive, the defense, Department of Defense, these things that protect us, where Hollywood is the offensive. This is how we push ideas. And when I'm talking about Hollywood, I'm talking about the whole entertainment apparatus, music, rock and roll, rap, all these things that roll into one thing. That is how we push our agenda or our propaganda to the world and is invasive to to the mind of the non-American.
Okay, so you brought up a great point, and so all right, there's levels. It's levels to everything. So the levels to
Uh-huh.
this is the levels are okay. Yes, we have uh the Department of Defense, and that analogy you gave was really interesting because the Department of Defense, they changed their name. They were known as the Department of War,
Mm-hmm.
but it was it can some they hired some people to to think about how are we as a department, how are we perceived by our own people. And there come a certain point in our history, people got tired of hearing about war, so they changed it to Department of Defense because that sounds better. I mean, to defend us, I mean, everybody wants to be defended.
Right.
So yeah, you there's something there in what you said, because where military in that common sense, not common sense, but that common understanding of it, we think about weapons, guns, those kinetic weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when we're talking about Hollywood, now we're going into the worldview warfare. Okay. And in that, the weapons, the guns are the visuals, the words, the lyrics. Those are the bullets. So it's much more difficult to defend against that. And so that's why you have in say Muslim countries, for example, they don't want to allow American music, certain forms of American music into their countries because they don't want have certain effects on their youth. China, big crackdown on hip hop because they don't want their kids gang banging. Okay. So, yes, when we put those things out, it's to Americanize people in a way. And that is a form of warfare because just throughout history, that's that's what people did in in the group of soldiers that would go out. There would be soldiers with weapons, spears, bows, and arrows, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
there will also be the speakers. You might have some people with a priest that would go out and they would try to convince the enemy instead of just shooting the enemy. And so these things have always taken place. And so Hollywood is like a super refined, just pure, more hardcore version of that. But yeah, it's true. It's a form of warfare, definitely. And
Okay.
so,
So
mhm.
so so I don't know how long you have, but we're at almost 1:30 now. We're gonna give the people what they always come for. We talk about the they. I'm looking at the imagery on your book. um, who would you say that they are, and what do they want? What is their end goal?
All right. I'm glad you asked, sir. Uh, the they.
Hold on, let me prepare the people. Get your tinfoil hats. You know what I'm saying? Get the extra heavy duty tinfoil. I mean, I'm just teasing, but because we have an idea what the they is, but go ahead, brother.
Okay, so the they, again, there's levels. On one level, the they are people just like you and me in the sense that they're human beings and they're not immortal. They have the economic power to pull the levers of politics and religion and other things, but politics and religion are two of the most powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the second level. There's this philosophy, there's this tradition that people in positions of power throughout history have tapped into, and it tends towards death and destruction and stealing, taking things from people. It tends towards showing favor to the wicked and the powerful and persecuting the weak and the righteous. So that those are not humans. Those are the things that people have called out to throughout world history. And they still call out to them today. Many of them by the same exact names. And yeah, that's the long and the short of it.
So they want more than money. They want more. I'm asking. They want more than money. They want more than uh physical property, the joy, the luxuries of the world, the spoils of the world. They need to feed on something greater than just mortal success.
Well, yeah, the people that align with their system, they are they have access to wealth and power and things like that. But the actual rulers themselves, that the people we think are rulers, that have to go into the grave just like us, the entities uh that they work for, they they want souls. Um they want to capture and hold them in
Mm.
that psycho spiritual slavery. They run off of they're fed by the pain, the blood.
Now, okay, continue, because you have to. I don't want to stop you, but we have to. We can't breeze past that because honestly, we could live in a benevolent, peaceful world. I mean, you think about it.
Yeah.
Why does technology have to be bad? Why does the merging with technology and life have to be bad? I'm not talking about transhumanism. I'm just saying, why can't the work day be shorter? Why can't the work week be shorter where you could spend more time with your loved ones and we all can have what we need? Technology has that ability to provide that. But why does it have to be so dystopian? Why does it have to be so painful? Why does it have to be come with so much fear? Even the news, for instance, why is it that news has to be so negative in the world? Why don't we get any positivity through that? I know I'll put a lot out there, but this kind of why is everything so negative?
Yeah, you're right. And the thing that makes it truly seductive is that there are benefits to many of these things. Technologies and sciences have helped us in so many ways. But there's that mixture of just being helpful and then just being insidious. And it's there, it's always there. So on one hand, people can uh, rely. Some people put all of their faith and hope in technology and things like that, even though they know that things tend towards maliciousness and death and destruction. They hold out hope in the system. And that's what makes it so seductive, because it's all encompassing. It's just not the bad, scary over there. It's that it could take the form of something really beautiful on the surface and just like, wow, everybody would love that. Wouldn't that be awesome? And but that bad, that maliciousness is always there. It's never just good. It's never just like the divine good in a sense, and where there is no shadow, where there is no lie. That lie is always lurking, and it's gonna strike like that snake.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's gonna bite eventually. And so, yeah, and this is a pattern throughout world history, and there's something there. And I put the citations of people that have been in positions of power, and some of them have written about these things and talked about engaging with their masters, I guess we could say. And
Because it has to be inhuman.
yeah, it
Because if I have two pieces of bread and you're hungry, the human thing to do is give you one of the pieces of that bread, right? You know, I mean, that's just the human thing to do. If I have knowledge, if you just human to human, if I have knowledge and it doesn't cost me anything to share that knowledge with you, I'm going to share it with you. Now we can get to the, where if we have finite resources, that kind of thing, then of course you're going to make sure, you're going to be self-serving. That's human as well. But the illusion of lack, that we live in a world of lack, that there's not enough resources, that there's not enough air for us to breathe and water for us to drink. I never understood. Let's just take water, for instance. Let's just back. I know I'm frustrating a lot of people, but just okay. Let's get to Davy Jones' comment first, and I'm gonna get back. Remind me to get back to water. Okay, Davy Jones says throughout the 80s, people were talking about how wonderful automation was, how much leisure time we would have with robots to do our work for us. Okay, here's the point about water. If I'm not mistaken, like 3/4 of the world is water, right? But
yeah.
they've created ways where we can fight wars over water, and they even prophesize that wars will be fought over water. It's like you have allegedly rovers on Mars, right? You have all this great technology. Why in the heck are we fighting over water when we're surrounded by 3/4 of the world is surrounded by water? You see what I'm saying? Like they create this environment of lack that brings the inhuman out of us.
Yeah, and to just build on your point, it's like, okay, uh, someone has some water, someone doesn't. The person that doesn't have the water looks to the one that does for help, and now you've got the maliciousness of not giving that person the water, but there's a even more intense maliciousness, and I think that's where we get into uh that inhuman is when convincing the person that doesn't have the water that they don't even deserve the water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, not only am I not giving you the water, but I'm going to convince you that you don't even deserve to live. And so,
But it's enough out here for everybody.
exactly. And it's enough for everybody if people would work together. And it's just like, wow, that is such an obsessive, like fanatical, just hatred, you know? And we see it played out on the world stage every single day. Some of us, unfortunately, might have seen it in our own homes. That inhumane uh, uh, sentiment from time to time. And so, yes, it's the story of our world system, and basically, so much of what we do is to fight against that by our own means. You know,
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, if maybe religion is the problem, so we'll get rid of religion, or maybe the way we treat nature is the problem, so we'll let nature have more free play in our lives and things like that. And we try these things, but they don't seem to solve the problem. It just seems to be another area where this maliciousness just moves, shifts to. So now, instead of wanting to help or start something that started off as something good, now next thing you know, it's destroying people.
Okay, Tom. I think Tom's a binary thinker, so he says he says not thinking water is a big deal is one of the ignorant things I ever effing heard. Holy S. Tom, the question we're asking is, with water being so abundant on Earth, 3/4 of the Earth is water. Why is it, with all the technology we have, is that an issue to be fought over? You could easily, unless the technology that we have is capped, this is an easily solvable problem. But it seems like they use, and this is just, I use water as an example, that it's something that we have an abundance of on this earth, but they make it a sacred and finite resource.
Yeah, and like a perfect example of that would be what's happening right now with the dam that Ethiopia is building. Dams plural.
Mm-hmm.
They're planning on building many dams. They got one big one already being built, and it's threatening the water supply of Sudan and Egypt, because Ethiopia is where the source of the Nile River is.
Mm-hmm.
So Egypt is they're preparing for war because they don't want to be at that disadvantage from having someone else control their water. But that's the thing. So many of these resources are just dispersed. It's not like, it's not so common for a nation to have everything it needs just right there. And
Mm-hmm.
so oftentimes when we do see that, what's the issue? They don't even have a functioning government because others are always there disrupting their society so that they are not independent. So yes, it when you step back and it's like, okay, if we were to work together, then so many of these things, but it's like there's so much blood on the line. So many of these people have fought for hundreds. Some of them have been fighting each other for thousands of years. And it's not so simple or easy to just forgive and just say, you know what, let's put that in the past and let's just move forward. You
Okay.
know,
Heather makes a good point. She said Heather in Wonderland on Wonderland makes a good point. Abundance versus scarcity is it comes to the mindset. And that's my whole point. Why is it that something that we have, and I know I'm harping on water, but it's one of the most nonsensical conversations that we're having. When we have an abundance of water, abundance of technology, why can't we merge those two things together and solve one of Earth's biggest problems, drinking water? I don't. It's for the life of me. It doesn't. It doesn't. We're sending humans into space, ordinary humans, allegedly. You know what I'm saying? We have rovers on Mars. We have, we can go and find a drop of oil at the bottom of the ocean. We go past all of this water to find oil at the bottom of the ocean, but we can't figure out how to get salt out of water.
well, yeah, I think I see where Tom is coming from, and it's not. I didn't get from Mo that water is not something that's important. The thing about fighting is that, why are we fighting? The whole reason why we fight over something like that is because we don't trust, given human interaction over history, we don't trust that other group to do right. We don't trust, Egypt doesn't trust Ethiopia to do right by them when it comes to the water. Therefore, they bring the weapons out because that's the force. So oftentimes, putting some hot lead in somebody,
Uh huh.
sometimes they won't move otherwise.
And hold on. Tiger Auntie brought up a point. She says drinking water isn't the problem. Water as energy is what we're fighting about. But no, I'm just okay. Take California example. They're always complaining about droughts. They're always complaining about lack of water, those kind of things. It's on the coast of an ocean. Just let that sink in. They're literally their whole left borders an ocean. And water is, I'm saying, a big problem for them. So I'm just saying, and it's not about water or the whole conversation. My point is, if they can do that with something that's so abundant, then what can't they do it with? They can do it with food and oil and energy and all these other things. So that's my point. And they use that because the normal human binary state is, if I have, I'll help. So they, quote unquote, they have to figure out, how do we force one against the other? And it's to have the lack mind state to, things are scarce. There's a finite amount of this. And we're seeing it now with the environment, like, we're killing the environment. We're doing this to the environment, and you're going to start seeing that they're going to turn people one against another over fear that our planet is going to die. They're doing it right now. So all I'm just saying is, stop listening today. To be honest with you, stop listening. Did I go too far, or
No, I feel where you're coming from, because and these types of things affect us all, and just looking at the chat and how certain people were really, I don't like using the word trigger, but they felt some kind of way about the way in which you contextualize this battle, because everybody needs water. Like, we have to have it, every single one of us. And so, yeah, these things that and we've seen examples of people working together and having successful, thriving communities and nations and things like that. And those things are more so the exception.
mm-hmm.
The in human history, the more than likely, though, what happens is somebody's being oppressed. You might have prosperity in one area, but it's partly because that prosperous area is taking something from somebody else.
And that's my point. It's that it's always the taking, the fear of it's not going to be available. And I'm gonna stick on this water point, because even if you say energy, the ocean is constantly moving. That's motion. That's energy. So I don't understand it, but that goes to show you that the binary thought of, we're gonna run out of water. We're gonna run out of water. But hold on. But then they'll tell you, we can put a node into your head that can give you all your Facebook and Twitter feeds straight to your brain, and you accept that science. As a human, we'll accept that science, but then we'll say, nothing we can do about getting salt out of water. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. You know how deep of a spell you have to be under to believe that? Removing salt from water.
Yeah, and I think that points what you just mentioned about why does science go in a certain trajectory. I think we start to, if we look, and that's what I try to do in the book, is to get into some of the philosophies that's behind the science and why the science might have developed in a certain way. And so what I do is I look at the philosophical influences of some of the pioneers in different sciences, like physics, psychology. You even can see this in cryptography and things like cybernetics, where we get the internet from. There's a certain philosophical tendency that lines up with this spiritual thing. and how you see time and time again some of these people we might see as scientists and heroes of science, they were influenced by some philosophies that come right out of spiritual sources. And so that's what I mean by when we look at the they, because, and that's why it's so important for me to put those citations, because I know I was gonna get that pushback, because you got a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. You got your people like your David Icke that talks about reptilians, and you got all these other things out there that when somebody would mention there's a spiritual dimension to this, oh man, you mean like David Icke and the reptilians? No, I'm telling you, with David Icke, he hits on some truths and things, but that's a deception. That's a worldview warfare taking place in what he's doing, a revolutionary worldview warfare.
Mhm.
And
I,
so,
I want to address two questions and two comments. One, Davy Jones says anything the people need or want can be exploited to control those people. That's our point. That's our point, that they understand that. And then I want to address Tom's comment. He said water is gold. No, water is diamonds. And what I mean by that is diamonds only have value because they only release a certain amount. Diamonds are very plentiful on the world, on the earth, almost to the point where if they released them all at one time, they will be basically priceless. I mean, worthless. The fact that they have a control mechanism, because these two comments go together, and it goes into what you're saying. As long as they quote unquote they can control the mindset that all of these things are not plentiful, and that we can control the things that you need and make them seem not plentiful, then we can turn man against man and play out the point you was making. I just want to make that point right quick to get to the lizard people. And I don't know if you heard the last show or not, but that gets us thinking with our lizard brain, right? It's either to run or kill. That's all the lizard brain is to run or kill.
yeah, and even the point which you made about the water being diamonds, and that's it's interesting because the process that we have to take water from the ocean and turn it into fresh water is actually the water cycle. It's a natural system that takes the water as evaporation. The salt doesn't go up in evaporation. The salt stays in the ocean, and
Right.
it goes up into the clouds, and it comes down on the mountains and so on and so forth. And there's underground, and there's the glaciers. So that's the thing. It's not all fresh at the same time. And so it's almost like a test in a way. Can we, us, can we work together to get this resource, it's all around us, but we can't access it all at the same time?
Imagine when they start doing that with air. It's like you said, because like right now, you breathe air, I breathe air. You know what I'm saying? We're in a room, we're not going to kill each other over air because there's plenty enough air for both of us to breathe. But imagine if they did that with air. Like, well, there's only a such amount of air for people to breathe, and we got to kill each other over it.
Yeah, it could get to. I mean, I wouldn't put it past people being pushed in a certain way, especially when we get into things like the metaverse that's coming, and
Mm-hmm.
how people are gonna be literally immersed in the internet. I could easily see some kind of cult being built that says, "Hey, people, we're breathing too much. We got to stop it." I can see that happening. I mean, that's just the way things are going now. And see, these things, this religiosity, it's gonna come back, and it is coming back hardcore in the West. In other parts of the world, it never went anywhere. Here in the West, uh we had a revival of the ancient Greek atheism,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, and it's used. It's like a segue, and what I mean by that is if you're engaging in spiritual warfare, what you want to do is revolutionary spiritual warfare. What you want to do is you want to discredit the a source of spiritual authority that you're against. And part of that process, you need like a transition, a transition period.
Mm-hmm.
So I see the growth of atheism like coming out of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment as that transition. And now what's happening is we see the animism of ancient times. We see the mystery religions. Now they're coming back. And the atheism is kind of getting pushed out again because it was only a tool. Because at the end of the day, there's certain things about us as human beings that we need, and that atheism, it does what it ends up doing. If you're consistent with it, you basically take the divine from this and that's out there, that's transcendent, and you basically put it in. So I'm God, you're God. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what the ancient mysteries taught. At the end of the day, illumination, understanding your divine, and reuniting with that divine.
And it's a hierarchy. They create a hierarchy. I've heard people reference this study, and the name of the study slips my mind, but it's the prison study, right? Where they put one half of the people over the top of the other half of the people, and slowly, the people that were put in charge started acting inhumane to the people they were ruling over. Somebody help me out in the live chat if you remember that study, but
Yeah, it
that's
was
the
the
whole point.
Stanford
How is that? Go ahead.
Stanford experiment.
Right, exactly. So they understand that as long as we keep people divided and we give one kid, Stanford prison experiment. Thank you, Tabby trolling. So, long as we give one kid praise, adoration, the power to watch over the other kids in the house, then that power will make the other kids in the house jealous of the kid given the power, and that kid given the power will act as the parents while I'm gone away, while I'm not here.
Yeah, there's that. There's definitely that, and we see that on the the a greater collective level, or a higher up level on like the a kingdom or a nation or things like that, where you have a ruler that comes along and he does well, people prosper, and then you fall into having these bad ones that the people are just miserable, and they're crying out like, this, we hate this way we're living. And so yeah, man, it's just so many. It goes into everything because our worldview. That's how we interact with how we interact in the natural realm. I mean, that's all we know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is how we interact, and so through our worldview, and it affects everything we do. And so yeah, just studying these types of things, you wouldn't believe how many times I would learn something, then I'll have to unlearn it because I realized it was a weapon. I was learning about some weaponized solution to a problem. And it was kind of like that reptilian thing, like, okay, you learn that there's something going on in the world, and you know something's not right, and here it is, you get hit with this reptilian thing, and it's like, there it is, that's the solution, but it actually wasn't a solution. And so writing this book, it really pushed me.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, it was humbling, man, because I realize now how much I don't know. Like, after going through those nearly 500 sources, I realized how much I don't know, and it's extremely humbling because it's like the rulers, the influential groups that know how to use these technologies. It really, and where they got them from, the inspiration. That's another thing. Like people that are hardcore into science, to where science is a religion, it's really interesting because they point to things being science being reproducible, and there's certain things in the Western idea of the scientific method. Well, one area that the scientific method doesn't apply to is uh innovation, the discovery.
Mm.
Okay, how can you reproduce a scientist working on something? Okay, I need to go take a break. I go take a swim. And then as I'm swimming, something clicks in my mind. How do you reproduce that? But this guy then goes, jumps out of the pool, runs over to his office, and he found the solution to that equation. And he produced the technology from that scientific uh, process that followed, that actually works, and it does something. Well, science itself doesn't even fit it. That rigorous view of science is it doesn't even hold up all the way, because you get to a point to where you're not dealing with physical things anymore. You're dealing with another realm, the imaginal realm. Another example of the imaginal realm that we touch every day: numbers.
Mm.
We're familiar with numbers. Think about mathematics. Mathematics is an imaginal. And by imaginal I mean imaginary. It could be things that are fantastical, like fantasy, like make believe, but
Mm.
not everything in that realm is make believe. Numbers is one of them. If I point to you and I point to something and say it's one of those, okay, what is one? Where? Show somebody, give me one. I could say to you, I'm not gonna believe in numbers until you show me one, like the one. Where is
Mm.
it at? It's not in the physical realm. One, two, numbers are in the imaginal realm, and we use them all the time. Another way we enter.
Oh, wait, let's not gloss over that. So what you're saying is it's the agreement between me, you, and everybody that's in the. Because you had the individual, the collective, and then the spiritual. I think it was the third, right?
Yeah.
So it takes for everybody in the spiritual to agree that one is one.
Well, no. That's not what I mean. That's
Okay,
not what I mean.
okay. That's why I
What
stopped you.
what I mean is that the one is there regardless whether we believe it or not,
Uh-huh.
and if it factors out by making proofs, mathematical proofs of like 1 + 1 = 2 and things like that. It's the reason why 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3. It's like it doesn't matter if we think it, and it, you hear memes and stuff, people talking about math is racist and it should equal something else. It's like, nah, bro. 1 + 1 = 2,
Right.
whether we agree or not.
Mm.
There's something beyond us. That's what I'm saying. Numbers live in a realm that we don't live in every day, but we can tap into it. What about dreams? All these things in that realm. And we have these stories throughout history of people engaging things in their dreams, and deja vu, having dreams about something, and then that thing happened. There are aspects of our reality that don't matter what we think about it. It's like we can say in our own mind it doesn't exist unless I say it does, but I would say that's like a self-deception.
Well, I guess I be push back against that. Things can exist, but we can agree not that they don't exist. Okay, you might say, okay, this say God, for instance. You believe God exists. Another person might not believe that God doesn't exist. That doesn't mean one is right or wrong. You see what I'm saying? Because it's all in what you agree to believe that what's accepting. Now, going back to numbers, I would have to push back against that because there math and this is why math, I think math and logic is under attack, because math and logic is the only way, is the only thing we can agree upon. If you have one cookie and I give you another cookie, then you have two cookies. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? I mean, but I think that's why it's attacked, because they want us to live in a world where nothing can be agreed upon, which creates more confusion. More confusion, it creates more reason for us to attack each other, and more reason to attack each other equals more division. You follow what I'm saying?
I think that example that you just gave, it just shows how powerful like the Greek philosophy has had on the Western mind, because you basically kind of just encapsulated the Greek way of thinking, which was God, who, how are we to know? Or how, it doesn't mean, like when you said it doesn't make one person wrong or right, but then you went to the logical, the rational. That was exactly the way the Greeks looked at it, because you had atheists and the animists in Greek culture that they lived together and they worked, and they had to come to some kind of understanding. Now, I would say they looked at the atheists in general as being silly, foolish,
Mm.
because they would say that there are things out there, especially when you start dealing with some of the art, some of the sacred sciences and things like that, that what we know as science today came out of things like astrology and astronomy. They were one at a point in time, and then they broke out into what we have today, and where people, you go to the palm reader, you're weird, but if you study the stars, you're not looked at as weird.
Right, I got what you're saying. I mean, but what I'm saying is on the just the logical sense of numbers.
Well, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, on the logical, uh, natural realm of numbers.
Well, yeah, that's what the Greeks were dealing with. But I would say, I would point to like Eastern way of thinking, which we see like coming, which we see uh, in Christianity, which come from the East, for example. All
Mm.
right, there was a way of looking at these things like, okay, yes, there is a rational aspect to things, but there's also certain things that we might not be able to comprehend, but they are. And it just is what it is. And at some point, there is no, at some point, somebody would be right and somebody would be wrong. And it is what it is. So there's these different ways of looking at these things, and they produce different societies. And so yeah, all of this goes back to worldview. It's so interesting that, you know, people from thousands of years ago are still affecting us today. And I mean, we're Westerners. That's part of being a Westerner. And
I mean, I will say this. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but we have to have some logic. In
yeah,
in all society, Eastern, Western, wherever you go, and that's why I think math, like they call math the universal language, because whatever, and you have to say units, because then you can get in the philosophical of, well, one human plus one human equals another human, so one plus one equals one. You see what I'm saying? When you talk about like procreation, I'm
right.
talking about just solely in units. If you have one unit of something and you add another of the same exact unit to it, then you have two units. You see what I'm saying? That's why, because we had to have that logic to make things make sense in our world.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I would say we see that the people that when we get to what number theory is and things like that, there's an actual branch of mathematics called number theory, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where you start connecting into the philosophy, and that's where you get to people like Plato, for example, that talked about these forms that they live in the imaginal realm, and we get reflections of them, and that's how I was articulating numbers.
Mm-hmm.
There is a one, but it's not in our realm. We just can draw from the reflections of it. There
Okay.
is a two, but we've never
Are you talking about
seen.
on the actual sense of numbers? Like I said, I don't want to go too.
Yeah. That's what I was meaning.
You'll fry people's brain. You know what I'm saying? If you get too far deep in the weeds, which I think that's a good representation of some of the conversations that we have as a society. A lot of these conversations are not beneficial. I mean, they're really not. I mean, it comes down to a matter of opinion. It becomes down to a matter of there's multiple variables in the scenario, and that's why science, when we talk about the scientific method, it has to be in a controlled environment with only one variable, for it to be reproduced. That's the scientific method. And how in the wild, for lack of a better word, do you have more than only one variable? Right? You know what I mean? You have temperature and time and space and atmosphere's pressure and all these different variables and scenario. I mean, because that goes back to this supremacy thing. Like, well, he had two parents and grew up in a nice home, and why he turned out that way. Scientifically, the numbers say that if you grew up in two parent homes, that he should be a good kid. It's like, well, you don't. There's a lot of variables in those two parents.
Right. And
You see? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think what you just said, it points to the, science has its place.
Mm-hmm.
Science has its limits. Math math has its place. There's mathematical proofs of things that are impossible in math. They're mathematically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like what I was just doing was really just attacking the scientism, the worldview, the philosophy that says science is how we learn everything, and it can be applied to manipulate everything. And that's
And it's applied to the wrong things.
well, yeah, when science is applied to things outside of its purview, like politics, for example, then you start getting these. You got to do this because the numbers say if you do this, then this bad effect will go away or be reduced. And
Mm-hmm.
people are
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, wait a minute. What about my liberties and as a person?" And they're like, "No, the science, and it's just like the abuse of science, just as religion was abused in the past. They just switched places."
Well, it's narrative. It's let me use numbers to drive a narrative. And the one I want to bring up, and we can wrap on this last topic, is the super predator. Right, that was the narrative for mass incarceration. It's like, let's look at the numbers. If this trend continues, we're going to have millions of super predators roaming the streets, killing at will. They didn't look at the social and economics of the people. They didn't look at, are you cherry picking the numbers, those kind of things, right? So we can use numbers and come up with a very bad, very bad calculation.
Oh yeah, definitely. I see that, and I see it as a propaganda device. You see it everywhere from neo-Nazism to aspects of the manosphere when they
Mm.
talk about statistics.
Uh oh.
And the thing,
We got to bring you back on that one. I mean, go ahead, because that's a very real conversation that needs to be had. How we were using statistics to talk about mating. But go continue on.
exactly, and it's like I'll just, without belaboring the point, I could wrap it up in a phrase that I heard.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase is basically, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. So just because we have some statistic doesn't mean that we can take that statistic out of context and use it in a way to maliciously hurt people the same way Bible verses were taken out of context and used to maliciously hurt people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we see it every day. We see it every day that you can limit the sample size, or you can open up the time window, to fit the narrative. I mean, you hear this all the time, and just to bring this the conversation 360 degrees back where we started at, well, they'll say this is the justification why we need less people. Look at the numbers. You know what I'm saying? If we continue on this trend, with these people, it's just not going to be beneficial. This is the justification why we need less people in the world.
Exactly, and I'm saying, the section of my book that actually talks about these things, and I talk about Malthus, where a lot of this, there's not enough resources. Things was first kind of popularized in modern history with Thomas Malthus from England, and Thomas Malthus was a member of certain organizations that tie back to the mystery religions. So here we have somebody that their philosophy has impacted our life today, but it comes out of this spiritual milieu. And so we're never, that's what we never escape. And that was before computers. That was before images flashed at us everywhere we go. There was something else that we couldn't avoid, and that thing is still with us.
Yeah, continue on. Or were you done? I mean, were you done? I mean, I didn't want to cut you off. But yeah, like I said, it's just, this is why we have to use perspective and respect other people's perspective. Because now that we only read headlines and we only throw out these isolated factoids to win arguments, instead of being, what I like to push is empathetic listening, understand that individual scenario. Because if you understood, like, okay, wow, like, oh, that's where you're coming from. Not, oh, well, I know their story. They're a black male and they have a single father. They come from a single parent household. So these have to be the facts, right? Right? Instead of saying, okay, well, hold on. You came from a single parent household, but you had a strong grandfather. You see what I'm saying? You didn't get all the details. You see what I'm saying? You were insulated by a strong masculine culture through school and church. You see, that's why we can't take just surface level facts and paint the narrative, because it'll be so skewed. And I'll use that word, not wrong, but skewed.
Right. And then, yeah, that's within the natural realm of just the way that studies are structured and things like that, that have a heavy influence on their outcome and things like that. And then there's the issue of the kids that single mom, but there was no guys, and that kid, that mom, pleaded with their kid to pray for wisdom and understanding and knowledge. Okay,
or if it's that circumstance where you had two Ivy League parents, but neither one of them had the time to spend with you.
Right.
But people will look at you and say, well, why you turn out that way? You grew up in this neighborhood. You had two Ivy League school parents, well educated. You grew up from great stock. You know what I'm saying? Why'd you turn out this way? It's like, because you didn't take time to listen to them empathetically and understand their individual circumstance.
Right. So, and that's one of the things about life that I really like, how life is equalizing in a way that so much of things that come down to success, so much of it comes down to just being at the right place at the right time. Because we can have these ideal upbringings and things like that, and still not be successful. The athlete that trains every day can
Mm-hmm.
still lose the race. The soldier that's just the coldest soldier, great with his technique, he can still lose that fight. We have to be at the right place at the right time.
And I'll be careful to use that term because you used it. Ideal, ideal for who? You see what I'm saying? Like what is ideal? I mean, one ideal situation might not work for another culture or people. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, definitely.
you might ideal for one group of people might be community family where you have aunts and uncles and grandma and everybody close by, where another ideal is, it's the straight nuclear family of just mom, dad, brothers and sisters. So like I said, we have to be careful of, because you said it, and I'm not getting on you for saying it, but I'm just saying, throwing out those words, because I'm an engineer by trade. You know what I'm saying? And I hate when people use words like, "Oh yes, a little." It went it's trending up a little, or it trended down a little, or what is a little? You know what I'm saying? That's a subjective term. Like, give me the values, and then I can put it in context to what it was, to where I expect it should be. Then that's why I'm a big proponent of numbers and logic, because at least with logic and logic we can get to some kind of understanding.
Oh
So,
yeah, I definitely think that these things are important. I just what I really, I guess you could say, what triggers me
mhm.
is I push back heavily whenever there is a opportunity for relativism to come into play, because the relativism just says there is no right or wrong. But what it ends up doing is blurring the lines between this things that actually are distinct. And it becomes a fallacy, a logical fallacy in and of itself. Because to say that something isn't right or wrong would then presuppose having like a godlike knowledge of something. But it's like, no, we don't. We don't know it all. So it's like, okay, what sense source of authority are we basing what we say in? Are we
Mhm.
basing it in some transcendent, or are we basing it on the me, the I, the self?
For me, I only can speak for me, is I would say what's productive or what's counterproductive. That way we can measure it, and it can see, actually see. Because right, like you said, right or wrong, I mean, who decides that? But when we say productive and counterproductive, it's like, okay, and this is with science, go back to science. What was your hypothesis? What did you expect to happen by running this experiment? And then you can look and say, was your hypothesis correct or incorrect? You know, um, so hopefully you understand where I'm coming from with that.
Oh
It's
yeah, I
not. It's not
do.
about right or wrong. It's about, was your desired outcome achieved or not?
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming from working within a scientific framework, you're absolutely right. Because science doesn't deal with those things like right and wrong. There are other aspects of culture that we deal with those things in, like philosophy and religion. And so all of these different things come together. What the problem is that I was speaking against was the scientism, where science is basically elevated to a godlike status. So I understand where you're coming from. And so, yeah, that's the thing. All these things have their place. And, um, you know, just having the understanding is
Mm-hmm.
what's important, to know where that place is. And then, I think at that point we're able to get the most out of all these things and keep a balanced a balanced way instead of falling into some extreme.
Mm. Yeah. So, like I said, and that's where we don't want to be in the binary extremes, because I'll push this point home one more time. When they get us in binary, then they can program society, and society is not meant to be programmed. Society is kind of like a garden. There's a spot for everything in the garden. So that's how I look at it. I appreciate you coming, Don. This conversation was I go away from this thinking about a lot of things. I'll encourage people to go. Once again, let me put your YouTube channel link in the comments one more time. Let's see. Add that there. Please go follow Don Oliver Davis, or Donald Oliver Davis, on his YouTube channel. Please go find his book on Amazon. One last thing. What do you hope this book would do for people? What's your goal? What's your goal? What's your hypothesis? What's your desired effect?
Well, what I want to do, one of the things that I want to come out of this work is that 5 level of worldview warfare picture that you had.
Let me bring
earlier.
that up on the screen one more time, just so we don't assume people know what we're talking about here.
Basically, what I want is for people to be able to analyze situations using this model.
So do we start from the top down or bottom up, just so people can understand?
You can really start anywhere. There are certain questions and things to think about at each level, so that to help you analyze what's going on. So just quickly, with the zeitgeist deals with the when and the where, and the zeitgeist is captured in what's called ideological terms. Like one ideological term would be the jab. Okay. So 2 years ago, if somebody said the jab, people would be like, what do you mean exactly? But now when people say the jab or the, I don't know how you feel about saying words, you know what I'm saying? But there are certain things that you could say, like, did you get that V? And people know exactly what you mean. And it solidifies us in a certain time and a place. The jab might be used in England or Britain, and the vac might be used here in America. So it puts you in a certain place. Technique deals with culture and technology. Culture I define as having 7 pillars that are indispensable for a culture: art, science, religion, politics, economics, philosophy. Then propaganda, think about, is it agitative? Is it integrative? Agitation, people fighting. Oh, you didn't get it? Oh, you can't come on my house. Agitative, I'm not getting it. And I found a group of people online and out in the world that we're together on this, bringing people together around a certain thing. Wicked deception, truth mixed with lies. That's the best type of deception, because if you're just lying, the lies by themselves are they're unstable. There is a weakness to them. But when you interject the truth with the lie, you get something really powerful. Then revolution, self-gratification, self-glorification. That thing within us that you mentioned earlier. If we're so many of these things that we deal with when we talk about social engineering and things like that, the reason why these things are successful is because at the end of the day, it comes down to self-gratification or self-glorification. That's the thing within us that we have to do to make this all work, because, like I said, we can accept this bullet. These bullets, we can say no. I'm not gonna get shot, or we can just let it hit us. And so, yeah, what I want is for people to be able to ask certain questions and be able to analyze things at the zeitgeist level, the propaganda level, the revolution level, and be able to see what's going on here. Kind of like in the Matrix, when that digital rain, when you can see behind the scenes. This is kind of what I want my model to help people be able to see behind the scenes.
And that's the key point. And that's why I appreciate you, brother, because you come from a place of wanting to help. A lot of time when people want to educate is to sway people over to their way of thinking or to push their agenda. And I think you solely want to help. And I think this book can be very helpful, as well as your supplemental videos that you make for this, which we wait for more and more episodes to be made, especially myself, because it's like I said, it's the book itself makes you look at yourself in a way to like, wow, like you could walk away from not liking yourself when you start analyzing yourself through the paradigm that this book presents.
That's powerful, brother. You know, some of those type of effects I didn't necessarily intend. So to hear you say that, and so that self introspection, I mean, that's how we grow as people. You know.
Because we all want to think I'm a good person. You know what I'm saying? We all want to think that, but then good is subjective. It's, too much is given, much is required. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you doing your best? Are you looking to meet people halfway? But once again, I invite you back. I hope the Facts family holds, you know what I'm saying, request for you to come back multiple times, because, man, like I said, this is a very fruitful conversation. What leaves me walking away with more things to think about, just for me personally, and then also the message that I deliver to make sure that I'm not contributing to these the zeitgeist, the technique, the propaganda, the wicked deception, and the revolution itself. So thank you, Don, for joining me. Like I said, this is I'm glad people could get a glimpse inside of our private conversations. I appreciate you very much.
I thank you too, Mo. I thank you for reaching out to me initially, and I'm glad that you did that, man. I'm glad to have gotten to meet you, and definitely be interested in coming back and really going into more concrete details of each of those 5 levels, so that people get a better view, understanding of what I'm talking about.
Right. We didn't want to kill them, or choke them with too much information at once. Hopefully, we piqued their interest, where they'll go pick up the book, Revolution, Introduction to the Art and Science of Worldview Warfare. Look, I'm telling you, if you do nothing else, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that will be a good entry point to this way of thinking and a discovery. Is there any Cash Apps or PayPals or anything where people want to show you value or appreciation? Do you have that information, or is that on your channel?
At this point, I do not. I'm just trying to put together a body of work on my YouTube, so that I feel like it's worthy to have some Cash App or Patreon there to back things up and from a value perspective. But yeah, man, I got to put some more work in before I feel comfortable.
The book itself, like I said, over 500 references, and then the videos just kind of bring it down to a level of like for babies. It's like baby food. It's like let me throw this in the blender, and like, so the new people such as myself, because it took me not a while, but it just, you don't want to. I think the natural pushback against it, and like I said, this will be my final point, is that you don't want to see yourself in that light as to contributing to this. warfare.
Yeah, definitely. I would say this war is definitely, you can't stand on the fence.
Nope.
This is one of these things you, me, we have to each make an individual choice to fight, because there is no neutral ground. There is no, you know what, I'm gonna just let them fight. I'm gonna just live my life. No, because somebody's gonna come to attack you.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta fight. You might as well fight.
I appreciate you once again, brother. And with that said, pay attention to everything, and the truth will reveal itself. Good night.